Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we look at a member of my classic computer collection. And today's machine is the youngest machine in my collection to date. It's not very old. This video is being made in July 2016, and this particular machine is only 18 years old from that year. So it's quite recent, but nevertheless I regard it as a classic model. It is the Apple iMac G3 Bondi Blue. Let's take a look at it. In the 1980s, Apple computers had been known for some pretty cool stuff. Not only had they been out there right at the start of the microcomputer revolution in the late 1970s, but they were one of the few microcomputer firms to withstand the IBM PC and clones juggernaut, and carved themselves out a niche in desktop publishing and the creative and educational market. Come the mid-1990s, though, and things were not going so well. In fact, record losses were happening, plants were closing, and customer numbers were falling. Apple, it seems, had lost its mojo, and it appeared to be in a tailspin to either acquisition, or even worse, bankruptcy. So what happened? Well, quite a few things actually, but certainly a couple of them were having a major impact. First, one thing that kept Apple's flagship product, the Macintosh, on the boil during the late 1980s and early 1990s was its cool graphical interface. Doing stuff, especially layouts and creative, arty stuff, was a breeze. Problem was, Microsoft had got its act together, and Intel-based PCs, that is the bulk of the market, now had a similar operating system in Windows 95. So why buy a Mac when you could get the same experience on a much cheaper generic PC clone, have a much larger software library, and be able to share files with almost everyone else without tricky conversions? In the 1980s, most, although not all, Macs were cute and very obviously not PCs. Fast forward to 1996. Here's what a typical PC clone tower form factor looked like. Got the picture? Now, here's one of the tower form factor Macintoshes. Spot the difference? Probably only just. The Mac range was largely the boring beige boxes running a graphical user interface like everyone else. There was no unique point of difference anymore. Finally, as if having look-alike computers wasn't bad enough, there were all these different models. This picture shows the form factors available in 1996. Underneath the images are the models available in that shape. There were just too many, and potential customers, and probably even Apple retailers, were dazed and confused. As Apple was slowly sinking into oblivion, something happened in 1997. The company negotiated a purchase of Steve Jobs' Next Software Incorporated. Steve Jobs, as I'm sure anyone watching this will know, was an original co-founder of Apple Computers. He was famously sacked from the company he started in 1985. As part of the deal, Steve Jobs returned to Apple as a consultant. However, he didn't stay a consultant for long. In a matter of months, he was CEO. And as CEO, Jobs made some sweeping changes. Amongst those changes was to drop many of those confusing product lines. Next, he poured resources into developing a new, affordable personal computer to put the cool back into Apple. The machine was announced on May the 6th, 1998, and shipped on the 15th of August. It was called the iMac. The I was supposedly for internet, but it spoke of something uniquely personal. It was a brand with resonance, and it was radically different from anything on the market at that time. The CPU board was built into the monitor. It was encased in a semi-transparent, egg-shaped plastic shell. It's a machine that caught the eye. It looked cool. It was designed to be a conversation piece in people's homes or set in a funky workplace doing creative things. The radical changes were not limited to the appearance, but I'll talk about those later when I show my own machine off. In fact, let's do that right now. So here you can see my iMac. This is a revision B Bondi Blue iMac, and this revision was released about 2 months after the original iMac, which is usually referred to as revision A. Now the only thing that changed in this revision B was the original graphics chip was replaced with a better one, and the graphics memory went from 2 megabytes to 6 megabytes. Other revisions had far more radical changes. So if we look at it square on here at the front, you'll see at the top here is a slot. That's actually where the microphone resides. Notice also the vertical lines going down the case, just a bit of design. Of course, they're under that clear, transparent plastic shell. We have the label there, iMac, a couple of stereo speakers either side. On the left there, you've also got the infrared port, and you can see the CD-ROM tray there, an on-off switch, and on the right, a couple of input sockets for earphones. Probably a nod to the educational market in case two people need to listen, like an instructor and a pupil, say. Later revisions replaced that tray for the CD-ROM with a slot. So have a look at the keyboard here. We can see pretty conventional design. Either side of the keyboard at the top, we've got USB ports. So that's handy for plugging USB devices into. There's an on-off button there you can see at the top. But also you could plug the mouse into that particular socket as well. I'll talk a little bit more about USB later on when we have a look at other connectors. If we just flip it over, you'll see that there's a stand you can pull out to just position it a little better if you like, or they can fold away. The keyboard's a little plasticky and cheap feeling. I find even typing on the keys is, not necessarily as good as some other models of that time. It does have a pretty sort of cheap and plasticky feel about it. In fact, the poor quality of the keyboard was the only thing that disappointed me about the iMac when I finally got to play with it. But you might have noticed something else is missing, or at least people in 1998 did, and that is there's no floppy disk drive fitted. Now, this was a radical move because up to this point in time, probably for the last 15 years or so, microcomputers had always had some sort of floppy disk fitted or associated with them. Not in this case. So it was a very bold move from Apple to go away from that storage mechanism and look at something else. And that something else would have been USB devices, readable, writable CD-ROMs, or the internet itself. Now, Apple didn't invent the USB specification. It had been around for 2 or 3 years. But what it did do with the iMac was to popularize it and bring it into the mainstream. Now, apart from the 2 audio output jacks, the other connectors are hidden under this plastic cover. Gives the iMac a nice clean look. So you can pull this cover off by just pushing it down a bit and flipping it back. And you can see under there we've got a microphone jack, we've got another speaker jack, 2 USB ports, we've got an Ethernet port, and we've got a port for a modem. Underneath those ports you can see a rectangular cover that's screwed in. That is an expansion port called the mezzanine expansion port, and it was never really used. In fact, after this revision B, it disappeared, but it was for third-party devices to be used for extension. Never really caught on, and as I say, it disappeared quite quickly from the iMacs. So a little bit difficult maybe or fiddly to get to, but of course once you've got all your required lines plugged in, you really don't need to play with it anymore. And you can thread those lines either out of through the bottom or just below the bottom of the cover where there's a gap, or I've seen some people also thread them through that hole in the center itself. So I'll just plug these back in. Of course, the mouse doesn't need to be plugged in here. The mouse can be plugged in into the keyboard. So it can leave one of these USB ports free for another device. But what's most important about this panel are the things that aren't there. There's no SCSI, ADB or GeoPort ports, and these had been mainstream in earlier Macs. So, like the floppy disk drive, it was a brave move by Apple, a bold move, to actually do away with these legacy ports. So I'll just get this clipped up. It's a little difficult when you're holding a camera in the other hand. There we go. And let's have a look at the other side of the machine. And we'll do that by going around the back. And you can see there the deeply recessed socket for the power cord. Again, that helps with the nice clean lines. But notice the power cord itself, it's actually translucent, so you can see the wires inside it. And again, it all fits in with this plasticky translucent theme of the whole machine. So again, I thought that was a nice nuanced piece of design. The mouse cable has the same thing where you can see the wires inside. Right, so let's move up towards the top. And when we do that, you'll be able to see the very large carry handle right at the top of the case. It's plastic, but it's very firm and very solid. And one thing that surprised me about these machines was just how heavy they were. You certainly you wouldn't want to lug them too far anywhere because they do weigh a lot. Nevertheless, that plastic handle seems to support the weight quite well, and you can pick it up and move the machine quite easily that way. Here's the other side of the machine, and this really shows off its clean lines, its unusual shape, and its semi-transparent nature. Very nice. Now, the first thing that I did when I got this machine was to change the battery. And it wasn't that difficult to get inside, although you needed to put a fair degree of force on some of the plastic clips, which I was always a bit nervous about doing in case they broke, but they seemed to be strong enough. To get into the case, you attack it from the bottom, and there you can see it with the cover off. And the main board and its associated componentry is actually not very big. It's quite simple. There you can see the bottom of the CD-ROM with some of the cords plugged into it. So it's a matter of removing that transparent cover like I have there. The next step is to remove those plugs. Just take them out like that. And providing you've got all the necessary screws removed, you can then slide this whole arrangement out. So you pull it upward. In fact, there's a plastic handle, or at least a piece of plastic you can hang on to do this at the top there. So you give it a careful tug, and it comes out as an integral unit, and that's what it looks like placed on my desk. So you can see the battery in there that of a change. That's a new battery. So really not much to it, and certainly much smaller than a much smaller main board than the other computers in my collection. Of course, they're a lot older, so they have much larger boards. That large chip there is the graphics chip. This was the one that was upgraded in this revision B. Although the labelling's a little confusing because you can see at least a couple of references there to a revision A. Although in the common usage of the term with these models, this is not a revision A, this is a revision B. Apparently the original iMacs, the very first ones, didn't have a revision letter associated with them at all. I don't know the history behind this labelling, so I can only theorise. Maybe this revision should have been called revision A, but because A is the very first letter in the alphabet, people, once they started to use the term felt that that was more appropriate for the very first model, and so this one was called Revision B. I really don't know. Anyway, enough talking about the innards of the machine. Let's boot it up and put it through its paces. It does take a while to boot up. That's a reflection, I guess, of, first of all, the relatively slow processor. It's only 233 megahertz. Later iMacs of this nature were considerably faster. Also, it's running Mac OS 9.2, whereas the original Mac OS that would have come out with this particular revision would have been 8.5. So it does take a little bit of thumb twiddling before it boots up. Could be, of course, that I'm just used to my older computers booting up quite quickly, whereas these later ones, it's the same with Windows machines, of course, they take a lot longer to actually get going. While we're waiting for things to happen, it's worth mentioning that hockey puck mouse that you can see there, roughly circular in shape. Again, the design of it fits in with the machine, same translucent plastics, same colours, and you can actually see the ball going round and round as you move the mouse. A lot of people didn't like this mouse. They found it hard to use, but I didn't have any trouble when I tried it out. It seemed fine to me. So let's have a closer look at the screen, and you can see the flickering lines there. That's an artifact of the camera. So those aren't really there. If we have a look at the specifications, it tells you everything about the machine. This is something that I did fairly quickly once I picked it up, just to reassure myself that I did have a genuine Bondi Blue Apple iMac. Certainly externally it seemed to be one with the tray loading CD-ROM, but I just made sure that that was the case. There's a menu option here to search the internet. This machine's not connected to the internet at the moment, so that won't work. Just to show you other menu items under Mac OS 9.2. The search function here on the desktop. I haven't deleted or added any software from this machine since I picked it up from the graphic designer that used to own it. One of the programs on it is Adobe Photoshop, as you would expect. Apple Macs were favourite machines for graphic designers, and certainly it seems to boot up fast enough. So probably quite capable for simple graphic design projects using this particular version of the software. So here am I doing some word processing. As I said, I don't really like the feel of this keyboard. Maybe I'm spoilt because I tend to use the IBM Model M keyboard for most of my work, at least at home here, and that has a lovely tactile feel. I find this keyboard a lot like some of the modern keyboards, just a little too mushy. Now, before I finish up, I should mention this man. His name's Jonathan Ive. Steve Jobs might have facilitated and championed the iMac, but this was the man who was mostly responsible for the machine's unique design. So kudos to him. It was interesting to go through and read the IT press's reaction to this machine. It was such a radical computer, people didn't seem to quite know what to make of it. However, customers voted with their wallets and sales took off. Quite a few more iMac G3 models with considerably higher specs were released over the next few years in a wide array of colours. The iMac proved very popular and was the breakthrough model that pushed Apple back into the black and restored its vibe. Steve Jobs didn't stop there, of course. We then had the iPod, more unique-looking iMacs, the iPhone, and the iPad. And, well, you know the rest. Although it's relatively youthful compared to others in my collection, I'm glad I've got this machine, and I do regard it as a classic computer. The Bondi Blue iMac G3 revived a company that was on life support and started Apple back on the road to profitability. It put the cool back into computing and made computer manufacturers consider the importance of case aesthetics and design. It also represents a bold step forward regarding external storage and connectivity. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at the Apple iMac G3 Bondi Blue, which was the original iMac. Well, that's all for this video. If I get any more new models, I'll be sure to put them up on YouTube. So in the meantime, keep well, and we'll see you then.